Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Omohundro Institute's Digital Projects Coffee House. I'm Jim Ambuski and joined, as always, by Martha Howard. This happens to be our final coffee house for this term. So if you are excited about presenting in the next term in the fall, do let us know. And as we begin to think about this schedule, we'll get you on the list and make it happen. But today we are ending appropriately enough on a 250 centered or 250 related project about Benedict Arnold. We have two colleagues with us today, Christine Peffer from Michigan State University, or more appropriately HNet, where I'm sure you all know and love HNet's listserv, and now they do really cool digital projects beyond simply delivering you the mail in your mailbox. And Laura Macaluso, who's an independent scholar and has a keen interest in one of the greatest traitors in American history, or one of the greatest heroes in American history, or somewhere in between, depending on your preference. So we are going to be talking about objectifying Benedict Arnold this afternoon, and I will turn it over to Laura and Christine for their presentation.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you, Martha. Thank you for having us. Thank you to Christine for being here with me today. I'm going to start off the conversation, and then Christine's going to jump in because Christine and I work together on this as a duo, as partners in crime here, collaborators. She is the technology specialist, and I came to HNet Spaces, the cohort program, which we'll talk about today, with my project, Benedict Arnold. So we're going to show you folks what my project looks like. It is a work in progress, so don't expect too much. We've got a good solid beginning. I've got a lot more work to do, but the most important part has been done, thankfully, with this partnership with HNet Spaces, the Spaces cohort program. But before I talk about that, you probably are asking yourself, right, why would anybody work on Benedict Arnold? He's a character that carries all the baggage, rightfully so. And I'm not coming at this wanting to interrogate the reasons for his turn. We've got tons and tons of books. There are bookshelves behind me, of the biographies about Benedict Arnold and the scholarship and the journalism and the history and also the psychology, trying to pull apart this character and figure out why he made this grave error. Although, of course, we're talking about it from the winning side. And so, there's a lot of good stuff that can be fleshed out, but they still kind of pull new threads to try and identify the pieces that made him who he was and the reasons for this turn. My project instead came about because I focus on material and visual culture. And I was writing a dissertation about public art and city identity. And I was writing about it in a city where Yale University is located, and that is New Haven, Connecticut. And that is also where Benedict Arnold lived. And so, in my research for my dissertation, which is now, of course, a long time ago, Benedict Arnold was popping up because he appears in public art in New Haven. And so, of course, he's around us in New Haven. He's in a painting in City Hall where people get married on the second floor of City Hall. Benedict Arnold's right behind them in a painting because he's a hero in New Haven. And so that kind of thing was happening. And then also the stuff of his life was also around us if you cared to look. And an example of that is that my husband is a museum director. His first job, though, as a museum educator, when he graduated college, and we both went to school in New Haven, we did not go to Yale. There are other schools too. He worked at the New Haven Colony Historical Society as a museum educator. And I remembered that the museum director's office has and still has a mantelpiece from Benedict Arnold's house, which it was de-installed before that house in New Haven was torn down and reinstalled and put into this 1930s colonial revival building that became the museum's headquarters. So in New Haven, it's kind of like normal to have a little bit of Arnold around us. And that's also true, as I found out, in so many other places that he was located. So we had a story about Arnold in New Haven, but so does New London, Connecticut. And that's a very different Arnold story, right? And so does Quebec. And so does Richmond, Virginia. And so does London, England. He is in all of these places. And so the point of kind of taking this question, well, who is Benedict Arnold? How was he represented in different places? And how did he represent himself? Became important to me because it was also very clear that during the American Revolution and the memorializing after it, they tried to write him out of that story. So Jim said, he's a hero slash traitor. He's a hero, for the first half of the war. And so in major monuments, i.e., Saratoga in New York, they don't know what to do about the fact that they have to pay homage to the men who led that battle, and they don't know what to do with him because he's really important to Saratoga. And so what they end up doing, of course, is just not putting his figure in the niche of Saratoga, this four-sided obelisk. And so his niche is still empty, but it's his. So he's there and he's not there throughout the American Revolution and throughout kind of the storytelling that we have done now for 250 years since that time. So that was kind of my thinking. And some of you probably do this too. You kind of get hot and you start a project. You're like, this is amazing. I'm going to do this. And then, you have all these other things to do as well. So Benedict Arnold continued to live with me as something that I just kind of kept on collecting as I went through all of my other, jobs and moves and projects and, all this other stuff. But if I saw something related to him, I tried to grab it and, put it in my file storage, my digital file storage, and on a hard drive, on an external hard drive, with the idea that one day I would do something with this. And as I was saying to my colleagues right before y'all jumped on, I imagined it was going to be a book because I was kind of going through this phase of about a 10-year phase where I was writing a lot and trying to publish a lot. And I thought this could be, a really good coming up to 250 because I am someone who is kind of thinking about commemorations and anniversaries all through my own writing because so much of public art, of course, is created around memorials, monuments are done very often to mark anniversaries and commemorations and big events. So 250 was on my mind. And the book project never kind of came to fruition. I started pushing it out, talking to editors, and really wasn't getting anywhere. And of course, digital humanities was on the rise at the same time. But as an independent scholar, I was not attached to an institution that had any staff, department that I could work with. And so I thought about, I've been to a million, public history conferences and museum conferences and talked to different digital humanities companies that offer services and offer platforms that you could, get on and pay for. Collection-based, because of course, I was a collection-based person. When I was in my 20s, I worked for the National Park Service as a museum cataloger. So, that kind of thinking was natural for me. So Omeka, of course, became like something I thought, well, this might be a good fit for that platform. But at the same time that I loved my stuff, I really was not loving the idea or trying to get myself on a track to learn DH. I mean, let me just be honest with you. I'm Gen X and my generation did. I think a lot of people did figure out like, this is what we want to do. We're going to use this new platform. Hal says, Mets and Mets. Okay, I'll go with you on that, Hal. So I'm on the downside. I was like, I can't do this. I'm not interested in this. I've got other things to do. And so I never was able to figure it out on my own, basically. And that is kind of when 250's coming around. I'm like, this is the last shot for my Benedict Arnold project. This is the right time. Someone's going to have something available that I can plug this project into. And I have been a reader of HNet for probably, I mean, I remember the listserv when it was on a really narrow, we used to read it that way. Now, of course, it's spread across the page when it was older and different. So I've been with them for a long time. And I did notice about the HNet Spaces cohort. So HNet Spaces is the network channel that supports digital humanities, but that they have created a cohort program in which they bring on board, a handful of people, and they work with you to make your projects come to life. And that's kind of what we're seeing here. Objectify Benedict Arnold has been the title for in my mind for 12 years. It's like, there's nothing new here. The material isn't new. I've had it ready to go. And so with Christine, I started the cohort in the fall. I think I applied maybe in the spring or summer. The cohort started in the fall. We had a series of group conversations with the other cohort members. And then, we kind of went off and really started putting in all of our content. And the transition, I was thinking about this, Christine, you can talk about this too. I was thinking about the transition. How do you go from, just thinking about or talking out loud about what this setup should look like and actually then doing it? And that's always a bit of a scary, tenuous thing. How do we do this? But with Christine there to help me, I had someone to say, okay, Laura, what are the materials you have and what do you want it to look like? And I was like, well, I've got these categories, these material categories, which you see right across the top. We've got an essay, we've got historical content, we've got material categories. This was natural for me as a material and culture historian. I didn't have to think twice about this. This is the stuff we work with, So I just applied it to the Benedict Arnold story, or vice versa, applied the materials to these categories which already exist in our field. And so we laid this out. We played around with different sizes and shapes and things, but we kind of came to say that these 8 clean boxes are easy to grasp. They have great pictures. Then you can go into each one. You can click into each one. And this is where the content starts reaching the viewer. So I don't have a lot, there's 5 here. This is a pretty big category of monuments, memorials, and markers. This in the end could probably be, 5 times as big. There are that many markers to Benedict Arnold around the global Atlantic. And all the material, as I kind of have it at the moment, is each object is given its own page, if you will. That's what Christine is showing us. And, you've got the dates, you've got the address of the object, you've got the mapping, so you can see where the object is. That's a whole kind of other conversation, because I've had a lot of struggle of figuring out, should the object be geomarked to where it was made, where it was collected, where the storytelling happened, and then you just have to kind of come down on something. Otherwise, you can't get anything done. And that's kind of, where I am with some of this. We have the years of importance located. And then Christine showed us at the bottom the best, kind of image that I can get. And also what I really appreciate in our platform here is having these links, which links for me, the reference source of information became a place that I wanted to ensure that whatever entity, whatever museum, library, archive, historic site has kind of the responsibility, has the major responsibility for that object. The object lives there or is managed by that entity, that I link it there so that people know where to go to find this thing. And then the related URL is basically an opportunity for more storytelling. So if someone has written a book and they use the object, if someone has written, a journal article, I can list that there. So that is kind of how content was put into this framework of material culture, which is the core of Objectify Benedict Arnold, because I wanted to tell his story through the things that he used and the things that people use to tell stories about him. And John Andre has to be in here just because, right? he just has to be here. So it's kind of taking the story off a little bit, to focus on Andre. But Andre is a big part of Benedict Arnold's story. So he'll be in here. Peggy Shippen is going to be in here, of course. His first wife is here. Whatever kind of close connection to Arnold that I can figure out. So that is our material cultures. Here's another example of drawings, paintings, and we have a portrait of Peggy Shippen. Most of you know this portrait. It's kind of famous. This was done by John Andre. So there's that. But this is a good example of an object that was drawn from life in Philadelphia, but it lives in Yale University Art Gallery in New Haven. So I don't want to send people really to Yale because I want them to associate her with Philadelphia, which is where her family lived. But there could be arguments, I'm sure, to go on both sides of that question. Luckily, there is room for so many other things on a platform like this. It doesn't have to be just listing your content. And one of the most fun parts for me, and I don't know if you'll all feel this way too, but I said to Christine, I was like, I've got this picture and I'm dying to use this picture. So if you would click on the essay, Christine. So here's something I wrote called Benedict Arnold's Boot Scraper, an essay in character. This photograph I found because I work on another project around a collector, an antiquarian, whose name is George Dudley Seymour. And George Dudley Seymour saved the Nathan Hale homestead in Coventry, Connecticut. The reason that the people can visit Nathan Hale's home today is because of Seymour. And Seymour lived in New Haven. Surprise, surprise. So I'm in Seymour's collection at Sterling Memorial Library in New Haven. And I was there a couple of years ago because I knew I wanted to work on him. And I'm taking quick pictures, as you all have done, in the archives. Flip the page, just get as many images as you can because I only have 3 days in the archives. And then I need to use this material for the next 3 years, basically. So I went back to Seymour because I'm working on another manuscript project around Seymour, and I'm reading and I'm like, oh my God, look what he writes about Benedict Arnold. My eyesight is not great without my glasses, but he says, this fine specimen, thank you, Christine, of old wrought ironwork was removed from the doorstep of the Benedict Arnold house on Water Street, New Haven, some years ago and sold to me by humans. I kept it in the attic of Casa Bianca, that's his New Haven house, until I took it to Coventry, where at the birthplace of Nathan Hale, of the Patriot, I can, if I will, wipe my feet on the Traitor every day. And he says, I'm going to keep it on the floor of the upper hall under the chest where I keep my Hale memorabilia. So I read this quote, exactly. I read this quote and I'm like, oh my God. First of all, Seymour is just a crack up to me constantly. I love him as a character. And then I thought to myself, you know what, Laura? I bet that you took a picture of that hallway photograph. And so I had to go back to this, massive digital collection and scroll through. And I found the hallway picture. And there's the boot scraper sitting on the chest. He wrote that he would put it under it, but I'm sure he took the boot scraper and put it on top of the chest for the photograph, which kind of belies the fact that he's saying, oh, I'm going to stick him under the shadows and, no, he's going to take it and put it right on top so it appears in the photograph. So I love that story. It gave me an opportunity to write this mini kind of essay about associating a boot scraper with Arnold's character, kind of using it as a symbol, which is kind of what Americans have done, right? Just write him right out of existence or just assign his character to a boot scraper because it's very low to the ground and you're just going to wipe your boots on him and you can't stand him because he was, such a bad person. So this is just one example. And Christine has some thoughts, I think, because she's asked me many times, she's like, Laura, do you have other essays? You could write an essay about so many different objects. There's so many different ways to make connections and to write. And here's an opportunity that you could do that in this structure. And I'm not there because I'm like, okay, I need to get my content uploaded. I've got so much more to do. It took me months, from this spring to do the 25 objects that are there, because I just, honestly, I squeeze in this work around everything else. So first things first is getting the content in, and then maybe growing the platform out in different ways. The next thing is a historical context page, which is just kind of an overview of Benedict Arnold in history. And I love this print, so have to use it because it's a lot of fun, and it allows you to pull out again the piece, and just have some fun for readers that show Benedict Arnold as a two-faced. He's got a bag of the devil has a bag of money behind him, and he's shaking it in his ear. You want this money, Arnold. And then he lifts his mask because the real Arnold will be shown, and then the real Arnold's going to be he'll be burned in effigy. um, Effigies are really talked about again in visual material culture, and in fact New London, Connecticut every so often gets it under their belts, that they're like, oh, it's time to burn Arnold again. And they burn him on the wharf in New London, Connecticut. Just, and then they take a leg off because his one leg is the good leg, right? His wounded leg is the patriot leg, and they stick the leg in a crypt in the back of a historic house. So it's just great to see the way people still make use of this story for identity making and for commemoration and for teaching local history and all that good stuff. The other thing I should mention that I love about having Objectify Benedict Arnold on HNet is I love the ability to make live links wherever you want them to be. So you can reinforce your own work with sources. But because I come from the museum world, my intention also is to highlight the work that all of our museums and historic sites and libraries do in preserving these objects and these stories. In other words, uplift all of them because they all share a part of the Benedict Arnold story. And I'm grateful for that, for sure. So I'll just go back up to the top, and then we looked at material categories, and then we probably should have shown you the connection. Oh, thank you, Christine. Here's a list of some of the beginning collections that I've used to pull material from. I'm sure this list could be 3 times as big in the end, but these are the basics. All of them and love, and they're all lovable and worthy of your attention and your support when the annual appeals roll around every spring, every fall. My husband is writing one right now, so something to think about. So if we go back up to the table of contents, let's just take a quick look at the map of the Atlantic world. Another wonderful aspect to working on this platform. This was kind of, I knew I wanted to have, I use the word story map because that's what people who don't know anything call it, like me. I'm like, I want a story map. Yeah, and I'm going to put my objects in, and Christine will tell us what the differences are, with this kind of mapping versus story mapping. But this is what HNet has available. I wanted to show the map because the point is to show also his travels around the Atlantic world from his birth to his death and to the memory making afterward. So we have the big map, and then we have small inset maps for London and for New Haven, because New Haven, of course. And then, London, everyone's fascinated by that because his body's there. And people still are kind of surprised about that he ended up in a church crypt in Battersea in London. And so did Peggy Shippen. So then you can also kind of get a sense of how global his world really was, and certainly was before he became an American general. I mean, he was traveling on his ships to the Caribbean long before he became a part of the American Revolution. So then this other nice piece came up. This is definitely Christine, said this to me one day. She's like, Laura, would you like to have a timeline, to go with your map? And I was like, heck yes, I want that. And it came out really, really nice, I think. In other words, all of these different ways of going about the same information. You can go through the material categories method and go down the list. You could go through the map and click on points, or you can go through the timeline and scroll through. and still get to the material. So they're just different ways that everything is connected, which is, I think, quite wonderful and well beyond my skill set. So I'm so grateful that it is here again. It ends here in 2013, but it can go right up to today because Benedict Arnold's name is brought into conversation today in so many different ways. And you can think of them yourself, and I'm not going to say it, but you know what I'm thinking about. In terms of our leadership. So there's room for this to grow into the future and deep into the past as well. There's going to be pre work here with his own family. His family came over to Rhode Island and were the colonizers in Rhode Island in the 1600s. So it can go backwards as well as forwards. And then I did Christine's showing us here a picture of contemporary television, because academics maybe perhaps aren't as interested in thinking about these contemporary portrayals on stage and screen, or the interpreters that live these characters out for the public. But I'm interested in these things because it's what we do in museums. This is how the story is shared for different people and in different places. So here's J.J. Field, who was Andre in Turn. Some of you probably watched that. And one of my friends, who is the person who owns Benedict Arnold's house site in New Haven, which we have actually opened up a piece of. It's under a parking lot. Robert Greenberg said to me, just last week, "Oh, Benedict Arnold, Laura, I've been watching Turn again, and Arnold is such a jerk in Turn. He's so nasty." And I was like, "Rob, you have to come to terms with the fact that he was really not a very nice guy, really." So, it's funny to talk about these things in different ways in the way that the public experiences our historical characters. So if you would just check up on top again one more time, Christine, and we'll see the table of contents. So we have a very light bibliography. This is going to need lots and lots more work. It was just a beginning bibliography. I think it would be fantastic to connect open sources here with hot links when I get to that point sometime in the future. And then the last thing is an acknowledgements page, which is a nice place to say, thank you. This is my story. This is how you can connect with me if I've made mistakes, which sometimes you do. And if you have ideas about, a couple of months ago, I got an email through my personal website with someone who has a table that she said belonged to Peggy Arnold, Benedict Arnold's second wife. She lives in Florida. And I said, well, let's get on a call and you could show it to me and send me pictures of the table. So you never know what the public has and what they want to share with you. And it's good to let them do that. So that is my story. My experience doing Objectify Benedict Arnold with Christine, and we are really lucky to have her here with us. She can answer questions, and she can also tell us about the other types of possibilities, for HNet spaces and for the cohort program. So does that sound good, Christine?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been so much fun working with you on this project. I can maybe give just a little bit of background about spaces and kind of how it emerged with HNet. It's a fairly new service that we've started offering. And then I'm happy to kind of just open it up for questions and discussion too, so that there's plenty of time to walk through and show more detail or back end of things that folks might be interested in, or if people have questions for you, Laura, just about the lifespan of the project and all the things that you've been working on. So Spaces was really born at the 2024 OAH conference in New Orleans. I don't know how many of you know sort of the inner workings of HNet. I know it's it's got this huge presence, and we have folks in many different countries who subscribe and who edit our networks and who write book reviews. But we really are a very small team. We have 4 full-time employees and a half-time employee as well. And then we have an intrepid group of anywhere from 7 to 10 undergraduate students who support the work that we're doing at our home office and help with a lot of the user support and help desk tickets. But we're a pretty small crew. And I came to HNet in 2022 as the Associate Director of Networks. And so networks, many of you are probably familiar with as the kind of outgrowth of the email listservs that we've been talking about a bit. But in 2014, those email lists got a web presence in the form of the HNet Commons. And so the Commons became a space not just for disseminating the announcements and materials through the lists, but a content management system where editors of these networks, reformed lists, could continue to communicate with their subscribers, but could also build digital projects, store materials, upload content that could be preserved on the web for the access of members and subscribers and anybody with an internet connection. Because everything on HNet is free, it's open access, we don't charge for any of the services. And those networks kind of served as the basis for what has become Spaces. And so we realized in talking with scholars at OAH that there's really a need for, as Laura pointed out, folks who need a platform that's easy to use, that's supported, it's by and for academics, it's nonprofit, and it's open access. And so we thought, well, we have this really fantastic infrastructure for these networks. Why not open that infrastructure up to individuals or small teams who have digital humanities projects and need a platform on which to build them, and server space and staff who can help support and teach them and educate them how to use the platform and ensure that that work is supported in perpetuity as long as it exists on the web. So in speaking with scholars at OAH, we thought, let's just open this infrastructure up a little bit. And so we piloted the cohort program in 2024, and that went really well. We had a few projects that had gotten published from that. And we basically now have 2 tracks in the Spaces program. One is the one that Laura went through, which is the cohort model, which is a guided, supported. We meet monthly. We only accept 3 to 5 projects in a cycle, to ensure that we can support all of that and make sure that everybody's getting the attention and the education through the Spaces program that they will need. And then we also have a request form for folks who already have projects that are well in hand, they're developed, they just need a place to upload their materials. And so those folks can build their projects independently. Of course, we still are available for supporting them, but it doesn't have the kind of monthly meetups and benchmarks that we have with the cohort. And some of the things I'll just maybe briefly talk about with, why Spaces is a useful DH platform for project building. It's really lightweight. There's maybe in some ways there's limited design features because we have kind of a set theme for what the HNet Drupal installation can support. But as Laura said, there's a lot of different ways that we can work within that structure. And so in close conversations with her, we looked at a bunch of different templates. We built out a bunch of different ways of setting up the space. And ultimately, she was able to make the design decisions that fit her project best. And so we transitioned from meeting monthly with the cohort into individual meetings on a weekly basis. And one of the things I wanted to just emphasize with her project in particular is that there's all of these fantastic data points. We only needed to upload those materials once, and then we were able to present them in multiple different ways. So Laura went through the timeline and the maps and the tables as well. And so each of these data points gets to kind of show and be sung in multiple different ways. So I think I'll just open it up for questions.
Sounds good. Also, in terms of capturing the data points that she's talking about, which are the content and actual dates, and then also the GPS, point marks. Can't even talk right now. But in order to do that, to make it an ease of transition from my external hard drive or my work to Spaces, we set up a simple Excel spreadsheet. And all of those cells equate to all of these boxes. And so I did the Excel spreadsheet kind of inputting of data. And then at the beginning, Christine was transferring, grabbing the content from the cells and putting it into this format, this template. And then the idea is that, I'm going to be a big girl now and she's going to back away and I'm going to, start doing this work. And of course, she's helping me transition through, giving kind of very simple directions for editing and, for the small things that kind of sometimes become bigger problems because you're not really confident with working with DH. But little by little, for me, it just gets easier the more you do it, which is true of anything in life. It's also very similar to, in the sense, to my private website, which was built on WordPress by a professional designer, that he laid out this template, and that I haven't talked to him in like years, because I just upload my new material as I want to. So I think that eventually that this is going to work in the same way. The only thing I would say is, if I had students, if I was in the classroom, boy, could I get a lot more work done, because they could help kind of populate and work on the research and getting the material together. But it's just me, so it'll be kind of as I catch as catch can kind of do it. So we are happy to answer any questions from either side of things, if anyone wants to be brave and ask.
Well, I think this is a fantastic overview. And yeah, if folks have questions, please do either pop them in the chat or raise your hand. Um, it was such a thorough overview. It's almost difficult to figure out what to ask. But I was really fascinated by the kind of wonderful lesson, Laura, that you presented, in the sense that sometimes you're going down the road of working on a book project and you just can't crack it for whatever reason, right? It might even not even be your fault. It might be, as we all know, the nature of the publishing business, and the publishers dictate in a very real sense what does get out and gets published. And there are all kinds of metrics and whatnot that they appeal to make those decisions. But then I really like how this became an important thing because of not necessarily the failure of an idea, but the evolution of an idea based on circumstances. And so I think it's actually a really great lesson for all of us, really, students, but all of us, is, if you can't crack a nut for whatever reason, there are alternative paths to take that you can actually get your work out there in ways that you want, and inevitably, or often the case, lead to something much more creative and useful for people. Alexandra asks, how clear was your vision of the digital site when you started Spaces?
That is a good question. And Christine can also comment, because she works, directly with all of the participants, and I just have my knowledge about what I wanted it to be. All I knew was that I had stuff, and I had ideas about categories and about mapping. I wanted to map his life in a way through objects and through places. But that was it. I really hadn't, I tried to read, and look across the board at all different interdisciplinary fields, and, material culture and visual culture touches so many different academic kind of study areas. But that's all I had, really. I never found a website that I said, oh, I'm going to copy that kind of directly. It just, that I didn't find that. So, it was kind of loose, but it was material driven. And so Christine then was able to connect me with the possibilities. Like, I did not come up with columns on this page, the title, Years of Important Significance, this column listing. I did not come up with that structure. I had the stuff, and I think Christine was very often, as she said, we met, thank God we met every Friday. And she would say, well, like, why don't we try it this way? How does it look this way? And she would give me an example, and I would say, okay, yeah, that's looking good. That works. Or how about let's do something a little different? So it was really Christine listening to me, which is just how wonderful for any scholar, but certainly for an independent scholar, to have a collaborator like that. There are other questions, so I'm just gonna stop talking there.
Suzanne asked, how do people find your material? Would a search for Benedict Arnold find it?
Yes, good question. Because of course, this is always going to be what you want people to land on you right away. And so Christine and I have been talking about this just in the past couple of weeks, as the project is kind of, moving towards completion in the cohort program, and then I'll be taking over. And ways to get word out about your project, we think, is really important. So getting social media coverage, getting some posts, getting some blogs. The project's going to be in an article in Virginia, like in the next month or two. So search engines, and Christine can speak more to this, search engines are hitting it if you type in Objectify Benedict Arnold and Christine, by the way, like I did see Google's now picking up on it. Google is the last one, but all the other search engines were listing it right at the top. It's on my website, so my website pops up. But we are going to do some social media posting, which we think will help drive clicks, and then clicks drive presence. So it's going to get there, I think.
Yeah. I should also do a quick plug for HNet networks and just how this feedback loop between networks and spaces that we imagine hopefully growing and continuing as the spaces program develops further and as more projects come online, that spaces is the infrastructure for the project, but it's also this built-in community of over 200,000 subscribers on the HNet platform. So, maybe not all of those folks are going to be attached to the networks that have subject area experts who will be interested in any particular project, but there's HAnnounce, which is the broad announcement channel that does reach all of our subscribers. And then there are obviously the individual networks and those who share subject area overlap with the Spaces project. Connecting with those editors as a Spaces editor can, we hope, be a really fruitful way to get more eyes on the project that people are doing with Spaces, and to potentially, forge even more collaborations between the editors of networks and folks who want to do DH work with the Spaces program.
Yeah, I think it's one of the great elements of HNet is there's already a giant audience there that you can leverage in very real ways, in very productive ways, if you figure out and work with folks like Christine on how to navigate the infrastructure and create those possibilities. But Scott's got a question that kind of brings us back to where we began and where you began, Laura. Do you see this project as a step toward a traditional publishing project, or an alternative as you've developed, or both?
Good question. And your comment, Jim, I certainly appreciated about all of us, that we learn as we go through our scholarship and our scholarly lives that, not everything is going to end up where you think it deserves to be, or, where you want it to be. And I'm a grant writer in my day job. And I am very familiar with filling out very long forms and not getting awards, right? This is what grant writing world is about. But for every 5 or 10 that you do, you just need to get that one good one, right? And that's how we work. So I'm never put off personally by someone saying, oh, this isn't a good fit for us right now, or, this isn't what we're about. I'm just like, next, get out of my way, next, because I have a project that I want to see done. And so much so that I have kept Benedict Arnold next to me. I've moved probably 3 times, and I drag his books and I drag those boxes full of stuff everywhere I go. And my family thinks I'm crazy, and nobody really understands, but it doesn't matter. I know. And I'm so grateful that this happened. The real question, Scott, is if this hadn't happened, would that have been kind of the end? And I'm just like, enough, I can't make this work. But look, it happened. So it's given me positive feeling with other things that I'm working on, to know that eventually my other things too will make it out in some way. I don't know how, but they will make it out in some way. So I don't see this as being a book now. No, I love this. I want to keep going with this. I can see great essays and great posts and different things coming out of it. But I've got a lot of other stuff going on too. So.
Anne?
Oh, this was so fun. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Christine, to see how this has all come together. And it's fun because I've known both these people in different ways. And so it's fun to see that, oh, yes, this is what everybody's up to. My question is, and as I said, what a great presentation, is sort of the metaphysical life question, which is right now, this is really embedded in you and your interest. And how could you imagine it potentially changes that other people come in, other partnerships? It's sort of, and how can you imagine that happening? And then ultimately, what happens when you're said enough? And how does HNet sort of say, okay, this is done, and the door is closed, but there it is?
Well, those are good questions, Anne, and thank you for coming. It's always good to see you. I think that all of us, most of us, or maybe 2/3 of us, have come from the analog world, right? We were born in the 20th century, or okay, some of us, half of us here born in the 20th century. Other folks were born digital and born in the 21st century. I come from the analog world. And there just has to be this, there is that kind of like, I favor longevity because I think like a book is going to last forever and paper is going to last forever and a library is going to be open forever. None of that's true. We all know that, right? There's just something still probably about like doing a digital project versus doing a print published project in terms of, if you were on the tender track, would you be getting any credit for this project? Maybe not, and that's serious questions for folks that are in those positions. I'm not overly worried about the future because I think about all of my virtual life, all of your virtual lives, my Facebook life, my LinkedIn life, my website life. I know we have to be serious. We should be like giving people our passwords so that they can take things down when we pass away. I mean, right, those are questions that we're going to be more and more, perhaps will become more formalized. Right now, it feels like it's very hit or miss. If someone dies and you've had this, friends that and their pages, their Twitter is still up. So what do we do about that? I don't have those, but I'm not, I'm going to go along with basically how humanity moves through these moments. Still, as Christine said, if this went down, I still have everything. I still have the Excel spreadsheets filled with all the content. I still have all the data. And does that answer your question?
Yeah, it was such a vague question, I know, so I apologize. I guess I was just thinking about in my own case, which I'm doing a project with HNet, and I'm excited this is going to move forward. But then it also is that sense of and crystallizing is that you publish a book or you publish something, and you're pretty much sort of you can keep going. You have other things, other projects. But this is such an open-ended frame that we could keep writing essays, small object studies forever and ever, right?
Absolutely.
And so
why not?
I'm trying to think about it as it's an open-ended venture.
Yeah.
But that sort of, does that move beyond you?
Yeah.
As you say, other people want to write about objects, let's say.
Yeah.
Sort of, I'm looking at that nexus between public and personal.
Yes. And when you first asked that question, I was thinking about this friend, Rob Greenberg, who owns a museum called Lost in New Haven. And he owns the Benedict Arnold house site in New Haven. He owns the archaeology, or at least a fraction of it. And, would I be willing? Like, how much is he willing to give to me? And how much am I willing to give to him? Right. In terms of like, this is my scholarship and that's your, and we try to be good collaborators with each other. And just yesterday, he actually gave me a new photograph for Objectify Benedict Arnold, which I already put up, Christine. So, we do this kind of sharing, but would I want to eventually turn over my site to someone like in a museum? That's a possibility. I'm so fresh though, Anne, to this. I'm so new.
I'm just thinking, and again, we'll move on, but that someone comes to you and says, hey, I have this great object and I want to write an essay and put it up here.
Yeah. I would welcome it.
What's that fringe out in betweenness of your site and the publicness of it?
Yeah. No, these are really good questions that you're asking. And clearly you're thinking in different ways. And I was just so thrilled. But having a long-term view, maybe that's always been my issue in life, that I really don't ever, I'm just like, I'm the initiator, I'm the creator, but I'm never kind of the closer, I would say. I don't want to, I'm not interested in wrapping things up with a bow because I'm not sure that life works like that. But you're asking good questions. So.
I saw a follow-up question in the chat from Suzanne on the question of lifespan. She asked, does HNet have a lifespan for these spaces? Presumably, if they continue to have relevance and gain visitors, then presumably it would stay up. Yes, so HNet is a permanent digital archive, which means that we don't delete any content and we commit to supporting the projects that are built on the platform for as long as, not just as long as the project builders are attached to them, but in perpetuity. So as long as HNet exists in our server room, doesn't go up in flames, your project would be on the platform, they wouldn't be deleted, and they would be supported by staff labor. And that's part of the reason why I touched very briefly on the sustainability of the theming and the design, because we don't commit to developing things that we can't support. And so the spaces is within, the scope that our staff and our server space and everything can sustain, and it can do quite a bit. But we don't want to be basically exceeding our grasp on those. So we will, commit to supporting whatever spaces projects are accepted. Thanks so much for that. That's a great question.
Well, I think ending on the idea of innovation within a very tightly curated but flexible platform is the way to end this particular iteration of the Omohundro Institute Digital Coffee House. So Laura and Christine, thank you very much for helping us bring this term to a successful conclusion, and we look forward to seeing how your project develops.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great summer.